This leads us to the second line here from Aquinas. He says, "Now, as for proofs of the truth of his doctrine, he brought forward only such as could be grasped by the natural ability of anyone with a very modest wisdom. Indeed, the truths that he taught, he mingled with many fables and with doctrines," excuse me, I'm put this a bit, "of the greatest falsity. He did not bring forth any signs produced in a supernatural way, which alone fittingly gives witness to divine inspiration, for a visible action that can be only divine reveals an invisibly inspired teacher of truth."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so along the lines of Muhammad only bringing forth, arguments and proof, which would, appeal to a kind of modest kind of wisdom. Again, his sort of go-to argument early on was what you might call the argument from literary excellence. Look at how amazing my poetry is, therefore it's from God, which is, if you're in a society that really appreciates that, you might think, wow, this is really good stuff, or something like that. Whereas if you're thinking about it a little more, wait a minute, Mozart is great. It wouldn't make much sense to say, hey, look at how wonderful Mozart's music is, therefore it's the inspired music of God. Something strange about that. So you had points like that. You had throughout the Quran sort of appeals to natural theology, saying, hey, look at the world. This is obviously created by God. But yeah, if you're looking for supernatural signs, that would confirm him as a prophet, there things get much shakier. I'm trying to be careful here because Muslims are going to disagree with this. Aquinas is right. Muhammad didn't come with any supernatural signs except the Quran. According to the Quran, Muhammad's only miraculous sign was the Quran itself. Muslims today will reject that because they're believing later sources. And basically in the Hadith, you have all kinds of miracles of Muhammad. But, the Sirah literature starts more than a century after the time of Muhammad, and the Hadith collections come a century after that. And so the passages that Muslims are normally thinking of in terms of Muhammad performing a miracle are basically 2 centuries after the time of Muhammad. And it's in a context where Muslims have been going out talking to Jews and Christians saying, hey, you need to believe in our prophet. And Jews and Christians would say, what miracles did he perform? And they're saying, none. It's just the Quran. Look at the lovely Arabic calligraphy. And that wasn't persuasive to Jews and Christians at all. The Jews were thinking, wait, Moses parted the Red Sea. What'd your guy do? Wrote, well, he couldn't even write, but you eventually wrote it. What is this mess? And Christians are thinking, well, Jesus walked on water and, raised the dead. What did your guy do? He came out with a book. So that's weird. Anyway, long story short, people started coming out with all kinds of miracle stories of Muhammad. People are thirsty. He shoots water out of his fingers, things like that. So the stories are late, but you have to really press this issue with Muslims. You have to go through the Quran and show all the passages where over and over and over again, Muhammad is challenged on why he can't perform any miracles. And the answers are, well, people in the past were given miracles and they didn't believe them. Or, isn't it enough that I brought the Quran? That's all you need. And so it's always Allah. And keep in mind, this is the word of Allah. Allah is constantly offering excuses and explanations as to why Muhammad can't perform any miracles like prophets who came before him. And that only makes sense if Muhammad wasn't performing miracles, right? It doesn't make any sense if people say, hey, why can't Muhammad perform miracles? It doesn't make any sense to say, because, earlier generations saw miracles and they didn't see them. The response, if Muhammad were actually doing these miracles that we read about in later Muslim sources, the response should have been, what are you talking about? He's performing miracles all the time. But that's what you don't find out. Now, the couple of exceptions here are that Muslims will say that the Quran talks about Muhammad's night journey, where he's taken supernaturally to Jerusalem to, visit the heavens and so on. But problem there is, even according to Muslim passages, even according to later Muslim commentaries and hadith collections that comment on the night journey, it was some sort of vision. He wasn't physically taken there. He was in his bed. So there's no way to verify that the Quran is claiming anything miraculous about that in the sense of that we're thinking about miracles. And the other is you have the claim that Muhammad split the moon, but the Quran itself, so that in the Hadith, you have this claim that Muhammad split the moon in half and that everyone saw it and that this was a miracle. In the Quran, there's a vague passage that says, talks about the end, and it says the moon is cleft asunder, and they say, aha, that's a miracle. Problem is, in the actual Quran passage, it doesn't say anything about Muhammad doing anything or anything, this having to do anything having anything to do with Muhammad. Mm-hmm. And if you read Muslim commentaries will say, no, this is talking about a sign of the end times or something like that. And so the only things that Muslims can point to in the Quran as far as Muhammad doing something miraculous are very vague and indefensible. The only miracle the Quran clearly claims for Muhammad is the miracle of the Quran. And so the entire case for Muhammad bringing any supernatural sign would come down to whether the Quran is supernatural. Mm-hmm. And the Quran's argument for itself is that its literary quality is so amazing that it could only come from God. And I don't think Aquinas is going to accept that as no. supernatural. Because notice, the problem with this is you'd have to say that the Quran, what is the Quran? It's a collection of words arranged in an order to convey some kind of meaning. You'd have to say that a human being could not arrange words in that order. And that's where everything breaks down. What do you mean? A human being can arrange words in any order we want. Mm-hmm. At what point can you say, you know what? A human being could not arrange words in this order. And so even on its face, the argument is silly. If you actually read the Quran, it's, my goodness, what a train wreck this book is. It's completely disorganized. Almost every passage you quote to a Muslim, they'll say, that's not what it means. So Allah was just apparently a horrible communicator. You read these passages, they'll talk about, you can beat your wives into submission. You say, Muslims, what does that mean? And they say, oh, what it really means is something completely different. And so it's just this constant, Allah couldn't say what he meant, and it's all disorganized, and you can't figure out which passage cancels out this other passage. You don't know the historical background, the historical context. You can't understand it. The idea that this is so amazing that it can only come from God. Yeah, I can see why Aquinas would think that Muhammad didn't come with any supernatural signs or miracles.
This also, there should be a name for this fallacy. Maybe you know of it. The sort of heads I win, tails you lose fallacy, where it's essentially, don't you see this proves God is the author of it because it's so beautiful, and if I agree with you, then you win, but if I disagree with you, well, the problem's not with the text, the problem must be with you because you're not sophisticated enough to see just how brilliant it is. I'm sure that's part of what you get into.
And that's the thing. Muslims set themselves up as the judges of this contest, right? When, according to the Quran, it's a challenge for unbelievers. You see if you can produce something like this, and if you can't, you have to acknowledge that it's the word of God. But now notice, Muslims put themselves up as the judge because people immediately started trying to meet that challenge, right? There was a guy who followed Muhammad around. His name was Al-Nadir. And Muhammad would get up and recite his revelations, and Al-Nadir would stand up after him. Give his own poetry, and then say, you guys tell me, in what way is Muhammad's poetry better than mine? And so he's attempting to meet this challenge. The response was, as soon as they captured him in battle, they killed him. They sold almost all of the other captives back for ransom, except this guy. They killed him. But you have people. There's a website called A Surah Like It, where a bunch of people have made surahs like this. There's an entire book called The True Furqan, which imitates the style of the Quran, but gives it a Christian message. Ooh. And there have been people who will stand up on a bus in the Middle East and open the True Furqan and read from it. And Muslims are getting off the bus going, thank you for reading the Quran to us today. So they apparently can't tell the difference. And so, the bottom line is they say, hey, here's the miracle. And if you say, that doesn't sound all that impressive to me. It doesn't sound like something that a human being couldn't come up with. They say, you're not sophisticated enough to understand it, or you're biased, or you just hate Islam. And so no matter what you say, you lose. So yeah.
Thank you for watching this clip. You can click here to watch the full episode. And I want to say a big thanks to our sponsors and to our amazing patrons for making all of this possible. Please do us a favor before you go. Click that subscribe button and then the bell. And that way YouTube will be forced to let you know every time we put out a new episode.